The biggest mistake beginning actors make is to learn their lines too soon before they're ready. And what am I saying? What am I saying here? Because as an actor, you do have to memorize lines, and you may not have a lot of time to memorize them. And the perfect example is when you have an audition and you do want to be off book. You do not want to be thinking about the lines. You want to be thinking about what it is that you want from the other person you're talking to. Because every character, just like in real life, we want something from the other person. There's always a need. And in film or theater and as an actor, you always want to make sure that the stakes are very, very high. It's a life and death. You don't have to play life and death, but internally, emotionally, your life depends on you getting what you want. Now, you may or may not get it. That's not what's important. Remember, the result is not important. It's how you go about it. And that's what they call objective. What is the character's objective? And by the way, there is no such thing as a character. If you can get that into your head, you will be ahead of your competition. If you're serious about it, you will get that out of your head. There is no character. Now, some actors, and there are exceptions to every rule, that are able to pretend to be a character and find the character and get into character. That's how those actors work. But those are exception to the rule. The rule is that when you go to an audition, and I'm deviating here now from what I'm talking about, I think this is important. The rule is that they want to see you. When a director or a casting director or an agent, and especially an agent, if you're looking for an agent, don't think that you being able to play a variety of characters is what they want to hear. Absolutely not. They want to see if you are aligned to how they see you, how a casting director will see you, how a director or a producer or an audience sees you. Because your presence, your essence, the vibe you give is how people perceive you. And so they're going to use that to the maximum effect in order for you to convince anybody watching you that you are that character. If you're not able to do that without uttering a single word, then you will not be considered, either for representation or for a part. It stops there. Again, this is a general rule for you to be ahead of the game as a beginner. As time goes by, you'll be able to gain skills where you'll be able to break off that image, but that's not something you worry about. You worry about early on. Early on, you bring you to the part. So going back to the biggest mistake that beginning actors make is to learn their lines quickly. And as I mentioned, you may have an audition, so you do have to memorize quickly. If you're not able to do and don't have the skill to do a cold reading, and by cold reading, I mean you're holding the piece of paper and you're able to look at your lines, then look at the other person, and still be in the part. That's a skill you can learn. But if you're memorizing quickly, you're making a mistake if you're not reading it first to yourself as many times as you can, because you can still memorize it that way without you speaking it. But when you're reading it, you're looking to understand what emotionally you want from the other person. What you are not saying to the other character, and I use the word character here in quotations because it's the other person. What you want from that other person more than anything else. And you're using these words hopefully to get what you want, and not spelling it out so obviously. So that's the most important thing you can learn, is to not quickly jump to memorize those lines by rote, or having an app that basically speaks the words to you in a very mechanical way, because you're likely then to repeat them mechanically and come off as false, which is not what you want. You want to create a living, breathing human being, not a robot. You have to be prepared to deviate from the way you think it should be said, even though you know the lines. What you have to memorize is your needs, what you want, what you're trying to say with each line, the meaning behind those lines. And they should be in alignment with your overall objective. And if you're doing that, then you're constantly exploring each line and trying to find ways physically and mentally. You're thinking of ways between lines as you're listening, hoping to hear what it is you're looking for, and mentally trying to come up with ways that may not be in the text of you getting what you want. And you're always evaluating, am I getting what I want? What is the other person saying? What are they trying to say? Are they taking me elsewhere? This is much harder than you think it is. But this is what separates you from the average actor, who just memorizes the lines and just says them, and that's it. Everybody makes this mistake. Not only beginners, even advanced, even professional actors will fall into the trap of just sleeping through it, So anyway, hopefully that helps in terms of memorizing, how that is the biggest trap, and how you must find ways to avoid it, even if you have to memorize quickly, by leaving it for last, by memorizing everything but those words that were written down, by memorizing internally before you uttered your words. And in actuality, what you should be doing early on, once you've read it, if it's a 2-page scene, you can read it over and over and over and over and think about it mentally. Each line, you think about that line. Obviously, don't memorize the other actor's line. What you're memorizing is what their thoughts, the ideas that are being presented to you. Because your job is not to memorize the other actor's lines, and I don't think that will help you in terms of your goals. But what you can do is, and sorry for that, a second. What you can do is, once you've internalized and understand exactly what it is that you want from the other person, developing a prior scene or / event that happened before you walked into the scene and are dealing with the character where you were before. It's important. Once you finish this conversation, where it is you are heading to, if you have another appointment, you have to think about that, because that's what happens in real life. In real life, even if nothing is happening, you have a plan. You may be talking to somebody, and in your mind you are planning to make a phone call to someone, or planning to go outside and get a cup of coffee before you head to the gym. There's always something that you have in your head that you're planning, and so you too have to have that. But going back to memorization, once you read it to yourself many times, understand every line, then you can slowly start to speak them softly. Not at the regular volume, but softly to yourself, like you're talking to the other person, going back and forth. You're still holding the paper and looking at it, looking at the person, always looking, always checking, reading, checking, because you just want to be comfortable doing that. And after a while, then you start to speak it a little bit louder and a little bit louder and louder until you get to the point where you're very, very comfortable. And if it's an audition in which you're self-taping, make sure to hold the paper if you need it. Highlight your part in yellow or some highlight marker so you can see it clearly. If you don't have another person reading with you, then just pause and give that other person, that time that they would require to speak, even though there's a silence there. And then you say your next line and so forth. If you actually have an in-person audition, then you would do the same thing this time. You would be looking at that other person. Make sure, this is what they want you to do. You would say, am I speaking to this person? Am I looking here? This person? And then you focus all your attention on getting what you want from that person, regardless of how they react. Because usually the readers are not there to give a performance. They're there just to give you your cue, your line, so that you can whatever. But you have to envision in your mind what you are getting from them is matching with what your response should be. If their response to you is that they're in love with you, and that's not what you want to hear, and they say it like they mean it, or they don't mean it, then you can react either way to that. And that's basically it. Going back to the self-tape, I would think that it goes without saying that you follow their instructions. If they want it twice, you do that. If they want a full body shot where you're speaking about yourself, do that separately. Try to give a little bit about your personality. And make sure that they understand that you're easy to work with, and that in a way hiring you would not be problematic in any way. Anyway, that's my advice for memorizing. Not to memorize too quickly. And you should try it, and if it works for you, great, and if it doesn't work for you, then do what works for you. There are no rules. I'm just giving you what works for me and works for a lot of people, how I was taught. I have learned to memorize quickly, but the key is never to set anything up in stone. So again, if your idea of memorizing is to use an app that is very robotic and repeats those lines the same way each time, don't do it. So that's my advice. Thank you for listening, and if you like what you hear, check out my other videos on acting. And thank you for listening.